Hey, everybody, and welcome to Savvy Entrepreneur, the podcast that is for entrepreneurs and by entrepreneurs. My name is Michelle Burkhart. I'm your host. I'm with thesavvymind.com. I really work with consultants, coaches, and service entrepreneurs to help them really leverage their service offerings and their positioning so that they can really draw in more high level clients and make more money. I'm really excited today, and I think you're really going to enjoy our host. It's Krista Holmans with Neurodivergent Consulting, which is a mouthful. She's got a ton to talk about, a really exciting topic. So, Krista, I am going to welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I just can't, I really love talking with these entrepreneurs. It's been such an eye opener for me, honestly, because I get to talk with people from a ton of different industries with a ton of different passions, and it's really exciting, and it does my heart good. I think your company has such an interesting mission, for one, and I'd love for you to share just that with us. Like, who are you? Who are you serving? Give me the picture here.
Yeah, so it's something near and dear to my heart. I found out I was autistic at the age of 29, and a lot of that was because I was going through autistic burnout, because I was in a workplace situation that wasn't set up to accommodate me, and I didn't even really know what to ask for at the time because I didn't know I was autistic. And the thing is, there's a lot of people in the world who may not know they're autistic, especially we see people my age and older who are
Mhm.
neurodivergent. And there are we're an untapped workforce, or we're a workforce group that could potentially be struggling. I ended up leaving that job because I wasn't able to get my needs met. And that's what a lot of people will do. They're asking for things, and maybe you just say something that say, oh, everyone would like that. And that's kind of
Right.
the point, right? Everyone would like that. Maybe we should fix it. And so the company was kind of started after I realized that a lot of the systems and the way our workplaces are set up, either structurally or even culturally, or our policies, and even the way we recruit and hire, because I come from HR and operations, and recruiting and hiring and retention was a focus in an area that I worked in for many years. And a lot of these systems are unintentionally stacked against neurodivergent people. And we're seeing numbers that maybe 1 in 8% of the people is neurodivergent,
Wow.
and so that would include autism, ADHD. So people who are autistic, ADHD, OCD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, hyperlexia. There's some other things, neurological differences, processing differences, people whose brains work differently, who have traditionally in the past been maybe thought of as a problem, like this is a sickness, this is something that's wrong with them.
Mhm.
We're saying, hey, let's look at this human side of this, and bring that human part back
I
to the
mean, isn't it just
workplace.
basically doesn't their brain just process information differently than other
Yeah,
people?
our brains work differently, and we have different strengths and different weaknesses
Mhm.
than neurotypical, or neurotypical is, the average, quote, whatever that's supposed to mean,
Right. I don't know.
population.
Is there an
Right,
average?
the people who fit into the systems,
Right.
right? We're the people that don't neatly fit into those systems, so we need the systems to flex a little bit. And so I've been working with businesses and even some individuals to help them look at where their systems need to do a little bit of flexing and changing, to make these changes that are often going to actually not just benefit the neurodivergent people, but will benefit everyone within their workforce.
Well, and that was
Kind of,
kind of the question that came up when you were saying that. It's not like if they make these changes to help the neurodivergent people, it's not going to be harder for people that are not, correct?
oh no, like for example, there's a lot of things that could be beneficial. Like I found my that I and realized that I'm autistic, and I also have ADHD. If I have to focus on something, I really have to have a quiet, distraction-free environment to go do my work. I can't work in an open office or work at maybe a desk where I have to also be expected to be answering the phones and working at the same time, because that is pulling me out and not letting me focus on one thing at a time. And my
Mhm.
attention is already kind of fragmented. So it's a struggle for me to keep my attention in one place.
Sure.
So that's unfair to expect me to be able to perform like everyone else under those conditions, where it's like I would need a quiet space to go do work, or to be allowed to work with maybe some sound canceling headphones or some music, or so I have some kind of accommodation to let me work on that. But if you don't say, oh, you need to have this medical accommodation to do this, and you just make it available to everyone, because think about it, sometimes even if you don't have ADHD, if you're learning something new, or you're on a tight deadline, or
Right.
something came up that's like, oh no, 911, I have to take care of this right now, and it's stressful, you're going to need a quiet space to work too,
Mhm.
or to be left alone to focus. Anyone might need that at any given time. So
Sure.
just building these things into the workplace and making it available to everyone, regardless of diagnosis. Because, like I said, I didn't find out I was autistic till I was 29. I didn't find out I had ADHD till I was 33.
Wow.
And so I didn't know I needed these things. So I wouldn't have had medical accommodation
Mhm.
to get that help. And anyway, and I entered the workforce when I was like, in the family business when I was like 12, 13. And then I moved to working for other people outside of the family when I was 16. So all of those years in the workforce, I had no accommodations because I didn't have a diagnosis or a label. And there's
Mm.
a lot of other people out there like me. So it's like, okay, let's shift these workplaces, make some changes, and start asking people, okay, what it's not that they need a special accommodation to do their job. It's, what does each individual human being need in
Mhm.
order to show up to the workplace and be the best version of themselves? Hey, I could really use this and it could help me do my job better. If
Mhm.
it's reasonable, why not just let someone have whatever it is they said that's going to help them do their job more efficiently, right?
Right, right, right. And you have to have an open mind for that too. So if you're just joining us, you're listening to Savvy Entrepreneurs, which is the podcast that's for entrepreneurs and by entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Michelle Burkhart with the SavvyMind.com. And today we're actually fortunate enough to be speaking with Krista Holmans with the Neurodivergent Consulting. I just love I love what you're doing, really, honestly. I think it's great. And I just want to share a real quick story. For a while there, I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. And so there have been times where I've gone like for 4 or 5 years here and there, I'll go work for corporate America. I have a bad back. So I needed, I wanted one of those little trays that sits under your desk to put your keyboard lower so I could be more ergonomically correct. You would think it was $50. You would think that would be a no-brainer. Oh my good God. They were just like, don't tell anybody else you did that. And I was like, are you serious? The fact that I asked for it and got it all of a sudden was like a big secret. And I was like, to your point, everybody, it was a CPA firm. So frankly, all of those people, and it was, all of those people should be sitting in an ergonomically correct
Mm-hmm.
chair, desk to make their life more
Yes.
comfortable over the long haul. It's going to pay back $1,000,000,000 return on their investment because of that. But again, it's that short sightedness that people don't, um, which impacts people in business a lot of times. They focus on the pennies, not the dollars, which is silly. So I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to ask you a question too, and we kind of talked about it offline a little bit. People that are, I would think, and tell me if you think I'm wrong. If you're 50 and over, which that's, I'm over that. I'm at the tail end of being a baby boomer. But if you're 50 and older, chances are that you could have gone undiagnosed in as being a part of the divergent population. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, totally. The diagnostic criteria has been changing and evolving, and the most recent revision was, I think, in 2013 here in America. And it depends on what part of the world you're in, because there's still some changes coming, it looks like, in the next revisions in the worldwide book. But when a lot of us were growing up, even when I was growing up, I'm in my mid-30s at this point. Autism, for in my time, was thought of as something that primarily impacted little boys, and it was a very stereotypical presentation that they wouldn't have considered me. Like they almost caught the ADHD when I was younger, but I don't know that they were on to the autism diagnosis. And for people, even older than me, the diagnostic criteria was even more narrow than that, to where almost unless you were completely non-speaking
Right.
for
And that's what
much
so many
later in
people
life.
think it is. Right. And that's not the case.
Hmm.
So
And I was going to say too, we know too now that the non-speaking also, like, people misunderstood that. Unfortunately, back then too, a lot of people who were non-speaking, they automatically assumed back then that so if they couldn't speak, they weren't intelligent, which is really sad, because we know now that a lot of people who are non-speaking, it's actually a motor control issue, where even if they know what they want to say in here, they can't move their mouth to get it out. I experience that sometimes when I get anxious, like I can be like screaming on the inside. I know exactly what I want to say. My mouth won't move to make the words no matter what I want to do. And I've experienced that temporarily. So I can empathize with that, but not on the level to not ever being able to get your mouth to do what you want to do. And it's like a big misunderstanding that we had, that we're still trying to correct the education on that even now, because people still think automatically if someone doesn't speak with their mouth that maybe they don't look further at that person, and they automatically count them out and dismiss them.
So talk to me. I guess the question one was leading me to, there are probably a ton of business owners that are either have ADHD or have
Oh
autism,
yeah.
who are having challenges in their business that don't even recognize this. So can you give me something, like maybe 2 or 3 things to look for? Like so that they can say, oh, wow, that sounds like me. Maybe I need to go talk to somebody. I mean, what would they look for? Because it impacts their business, I'm sure.
Oh, totally. And especially looking at entrepreneurs, like why I myself and a lot of other neurodivergent people, we start our own businesses because we're struggling to fit into the systems as they are placed. And we like go set up our own systems because we're struggling with
Yeah.
the systems, right? I struggled, with my multiply neurodivergent things. Like things I specifically struggle with in the workplace are types of communication issues. I struggle to, and everyone's going to be different depending on what their particular
Sure.
neurodivergent cocktail is, right? So I'm ADHD, autistic, and hyperlexic. So I struggle to keep verbal instructions in my head. So if I need directions in writing or time to really write those down, so that was something that I was needing, that I really didn't understand how much I needed. And in the workplace, I didn't understand for a while that my not hanging out with my coworkers during lunch because I needed a break and downtime and away from them was giving them sometimes the impression that I didn't like my coworkers. So it was
Oh,
like these differences, like, that were creating these misunderstandings. I just needed a break because I was sitting in an open office all day, and I needed to just go to my car or go outside or go somewhere quiet because I was trying to survive days in an environment that was overwhelming to me. Like, the sensory environment was overwhelming to me. That's part of me being autistic. And then, part of me being hyperlexic was I was on almost every review that I was getting, with my manager. I was getting in trouble, like, oh, there was a typo in that email. There was a typo in this email. There was a typo here. I read things like, one, I don't read phonetically. I've never read phonetically. I see things in pictures and I read like paragraphs and sentences at a time. So
okay.
I can't see the typos. My brain corrects them. They don't exist to me. I even tried when I was working in that company to take classes to fix, like, to try, like, I was desperate. I want to see the typos. I just don't see them. I don't know, like, I can't. It was every single review was like, you missed a typo. You never figured out that not to see, not to stop
Right.
missing typos. And it killed my soul because I'm a perfectionist. I'm an extreme perfectionist. I'm a very all or nothing kind of a person, which supposedly is
Mhm.
tied to being autistic as well. And so these things can be, when we talk about autism, the way it's medicalized, these are like very bad things. They say, oh, they're obsessive, blah, blah, blah. But these are also skills in the workplace. Like
Right,
my
right.
my ability to obsess and not let things go is why I am a good problem solver, because I
Mhm.
can't let things go, because I see all the problems and they like stare me in the face, and then I'm like, oh, there's this problem and I'm stuck on it until I solve it, because it's just like I can't let it go. And
Right.
so you can see how that's double edged, right? It's like it can be a
Sure.
good and a bad thing. It can really go either way. But a lot of times we only hear the bad and we don't get to see the duality of that,
Sure.
with neurodivergent people, because we aren't talking about the good side.
Sure. And if you're just joining us today, you are actually listening to The Savvy Entrepreneur, which is the podcast that's for entrepreneurs and by entrepreneurs. My name is Michelle Burkhart. I'm with thesavvymind.com, and I'm excited to be your host. And today we're actually talking with Krista Holmans, she's from the Neurodivergent Consulting. I want to call it a group for some reason. That just flows. For some reason that flows. So I don't know if that's prophesizing that you're growing right now. I
Oh
don't
gosh.
know. We're going to take that as yes, that your
Uh-oh.
business is growing. We're going to take that as a yes. So tell me a little bit about, like, what can you give us some examples as far as like what would some of the changes be that well, I guess a business owner, it surprises me in a way that somebody that is divergent, is that the right terminology?
Neurodivergent, divergent, yeah, that works for me.
Neurodivergent, because I don't want to,
Yeah,
insult
I'm not
anybody.
offended if you shorten it to
Okay.
divergent. I do that sometimes.
So if somebody is neurodivergent and they're hired and they show these characteristics, I mean, don't they just get fired? Let's be frank. Do they get fired?
Sometimes, sometimes it depends on the culture, and that's one of the reasons I realized I needed to start my company, because I was I've come from a history of recruiting. And so being in that, you see what kind of people you're hiring, you interview people, you see what kind of people that, oh, I really click with this person, I jive with this person, I relate to this person. And then you see all the people I jive with and relate to seem to be the ones that are being let go for not being a culture fit,
Oh,
you know. And then you notice after, I noticed after I found out I was neurodivergent, that a lot of times the difference too is with the neurodivergent people who probably didn't know they were neurodivergent, are let go for a culture fit. They're the ones who never saw it coming,
oh.
whereas a
Well,
lot of
because in
times the
their
other
mind, they're
people,
doing great. They're doing what they need to
yeah,
do.
they
Yeah.
they didn't pick up on, because we do need things spelled out to us. Like, if I'm underperforming, come and tell me, hey, I'm underperforming. The typos thing, please don't tell me I want typos. Like, now I'm going to tell you, hey, I'm always going to have some typos. Like, we
So
solved
have
that,
someone
at the
else check
company.
my work.
Yeah, just have a second set of eyes for everybody in the company, not just me. Just make it policy that everything that's a document, and emails doesn't matter that much. Calm down on the emails, unless you can
Right.
ask someone to read. It doesn't need to be that hard. But it was like, oh, policy wide, second set of eyes in every document or proposal that goes out. Look, you accommodated everybody. You didn't need to single anyone out. It made it a non-issue, right? These things are so simple sometimes.
Right. Yeah,
you
that's
know?
true. That is true. So if you are an employer and you notice yourself just not, just things are not flowing, is there help? What kind of a person, who would you go to for help or to even talk about this? Where would be your first stop?
With neurodiversity, a
Yeah.
lot of times, well, education is the first stop, and that's what I've started doing with my business. And I'm not the only person out there, but there's a need for, if you're sourcing education about neurodivergent people and neurodiversity, to get the information from people who are actually neurodivergent themselves. So
I
that's
I
my
can
plea.
see that.
Yeah, I can help you, but if it's not me, please go to someone who's actually neurodivergent. We've had enough of people kind of talking about us, and they're looking at us under a magnifying glass, making assumptions based on observing us from the outside without actually understanding our intentions and our motivations. And a lot of times people are getting it wrong,
Hmm.
you know,
Because, as an
and we've got to
employer,
change some
sure.
conceptions.
When you've hired someone that's neurodivergent and you're not aware of that, and if you are, most small businesses, frankly, I mean, well, you're considered a small business if you have under 100 employees, but I think if you hire someone that's neurodivergent and you have 4 or 5, even 10 employees and you don't know it, that's when it really starts to, the fewer the people on your team, the more obvious it becomes that there's changes that need to happen to accommodate if you want to keep that person. And so,
Oh yeah.
and then you've got, like you were saying earlier, 1 out of 8 chance that possibly the owner of the company is neurodivergent as well. So, and again, if nobody knows what's going on, you can't change anything or fix anything. And then to your point, then you have somebody that has really great, for example, in your case, really great problem solving skills leaving your organization. And then again, then you start that process all over again. And who's to say you're not going to hire somebody again that's neurodivergent?
Turnover is expensive.
It's so expensive.
Turnover is really expensive, and some people don't realize how much a bad hire costs, or how much losing a seasoned employee costs, and
Mhm.
having to train a new employee. And it's really expensive.
Well, and this is what's really interesting, because I do a lot of mindset work with my coaching, and what people don't understand about mindset and your belief systems is that it's neuro. It has to
Hmm.
do your brain's a computer, so whatever you learned when you were a kid, those beliefs follow you into adulthood. So I say to these people, this belief system is not a character flaw. It's the way your brain works. And I think for neurodivergent people as well,
Oh
everybody
yeah,
thinks of it as a character flaw, and it's not a character flaw. It's simply the way their brain works. And
it
so,
just is.
I mean, it's kind of like you're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater in so many cases. If you've got a solid employee that shows up on time, or actually shows up in all ways,
Mm.
and that you don't want to keep them, then, so how would you even go about doing that? Let's say, you are really one of these high level employers, and you notice that you've got an employee or two that you're thinking is something going on. I mean, can you do anything? How do you handle that from a legal standpoint?
Well, I mean, you have to consider, has the employee actually disclosed anything to you, because there is that issue where it is still considered medical information.
Right.
So like with any other, like you can't, if you suspected they had another medical condition, like you'd be under the same thing, where about prying into that, where they'd have to voluntarily disclose. And that's why I've been pushing with businesses a lot more to, okay, let's just fix the systems that
Mhm.
are maybe unintentionally causing harm to these invisible neuro minorities, that
Right.
because the systems need to be fixed regardless, because they're making it harder for people to be able to stay in your company. And it can be little things, like, for example, when I was working in house with a company, doing some coaching with one of their neurodivergent team members. We were coaching the employee, but then we realized there was some systems in place in the company that were unintentionally stacked against the employee. And so it was just like, oh, this handbook is completely inaccessible, and we're missing some basic things here that people will need to be able to understand their job more effectively and be able to
Interesting.
digest the information. And so we made some changes to the policy and the way they onboard and train people. And so it was like, it highlights those other things that are going to help, not just the people right there that we came in to look
Mhm.
at, but also the systems, and fix the systems so that people coming into the system in the future won't have the same setbacks
They
going
won't
through
have the
the
same
system.
struggles. So
Hmm.
are there any typical adaptations that you see happening, where you're starting to see this is something that's kind of becoming more, okay, yeah, I understand that. Yes, most companies need to make this adaptation.
Oh, yeah. So companies are becoming more aware of sensory accommodations, whether that's changing the environment or allowing people to telework now. That's a big one for
Right.
me, is like it's so easy. And, my the last company that, that I'm no longer with full time, but still working with contracting time to time, we were all remote by the time I left there, but I was one of the first remote employees. And instead of being met with "that's not how we do things here," they were like, "Okay, well, tell me how that works."
Oh, that's
Instead of
neat.
no. Instead of no, how does that work? And then we saw that it worked so well that everyone was remote, and we were all remote like the fall before COVID happened. And we had just turned in our physical office keys right before all of that in like September. And then, what happened in March, it
Right.
was like all we had to do was shift our trainings to be delivered virtual, because we were still doing in-person trainings with companies. And so those shifted to virtual when COVID happened. But another way, one of those, accommodating neurodivergent team members can be beneficial to everyone in the workplace.
So that
It
would be
really was good
something.
for the company.
So workspace is one of the things that
The
often
physical
comes up.
space.
Their physical space
Oh yeah.
often. What is something else that comes up often, do you think?
Really, even the initial job interview process, looking at how we bring people into the company, and then how, if they make it through that process, because a lot of autistic and neurodivergent people, especially autistic people, we may struggle to sell ourselves in the interview, and understand like how to present ourselves well. Or if you've got someone who's got anxiety,
Mhm.
even if someone who has anxiety may be an amazing freaking employee. They may be the most dedicated employee ever, especially if they got perfectionism. It makes us ridiculously driven. Perfectionism sucks, but it makes you a good employee, But that comes from having a lot of
Right.
anxiety. And so if you've got anxiety, you're not going to look good in a job interview, maybe. So it's like there's more like push to say, okay, how can we let someone actually show their skills, in a non-traditional way, or not taking
Right.
points off for people for if maybe they don't have eye contact or they seem a little bit nervous, and giving people the chance to kind of perform, and taking those things into consideration. And then the way you communicate and deliver information to your employees, and the kind of ways you structure check-ins, and the way you structure your goals, and make sure everything is very clear, your expectations are very clear, and things are not wishy-washy and up in the air. Earlier we mentioned
Sure.
how the neurodivergent employees never saw things coming, because we aren't like autistic people. A lot of us may not be reading between the lines,
Gotcha.
and so if we're not reading between the lines and you haven't been very clear with us, we may not understand expectations that you think other people will just take for granted. So we need the expectations made very clear.
Gotcha.
So
And
those kinds of things.
right. And if you're just joining us today, you're listening to The Savvy Entrepreneur, which is the podcast for entrepreneurs and by entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Michelle Burkhart with thesavvymind.com. And today we're talking with Krista Holmans with Neurodivergent Consulting. And I wanted to, we're kind of getting close now to the end. So, what I really would like to do is just, can you give employers, what are your top 3 tips for employers that maybe are dealing with somebody or struggling themselves with neurodivergence? What would you say to them? What would your parting words be?
First, I would say learn, educate yourself, learn from neurodivergent people about what it means, because a lot of the information out there is just really just gloom and doom and sad and very stigmatized and not very human. Number two, I would say be willing to flex
Oh, I
your
like that.
systems, look at your policies, change, evolve, right? We need to be agile. That's a buzzword. Are we ready to put that one to bed yet? Agile. We need everybody to be a bit agile, right?
Yep.
And change these systems to include neurodivergent people, because right now we've been trying to do all of the flexing to fit into systems that weren't designed with us or our needs in mind. And we're asking if you guys can just meet a little bit, meet in the middle, and do some of the stretching too, so that we can be included in systems that have already been set up to benefit everyone else for many
Right.
years. Was that two? And then we've got, you
That
said
was
three.
two. That's two.
Okay. And so three, I would say, if you think that you yourself might be neurodivergent, uh, keep looking into it, what that means, because there are many different types of neurodivergences. And so my aha moment was when I was studying something else and accidentally stumbled across a neurodivergent person, and they were explaining how their brain worked, and I went, wait, that's me, isn't that everybody? And it was like, oh, okay. And so then I kind of stumbled
Really?
down the rabbit hole and asked to see a medical professional that understood, autistic adults, because I had seen that. So, then, if you're going to go down that route, and you think looking into it further might be for you after you've dug a little bit into reading, the voices of people that you relate to, find someone who has experience with adults, because right now, as we've said before, a lot of the focus has been on children. So people my age, our age,
Mm.
older, and the adults especially haven't been a focus. So a lot of medical providers are still very focused on children. And so if you go to someone who's focused on children and you don't present like a child, because you are not a child, you won't,
Right. Right.
they may checklist you against children they see and say, no, you're not, without, but they don't see adults. So that's not really fair for them to make that assessment. So make sure you
So
see someone who specializes in adults.
is that a psychiatrist type of person, or who, what kind of a modality is that?
Yeah, it's going to be a neuropsych, I believe, or a psychiatrist. I think there's a few
Okay.
different people that would have the qualification, but it is right now we've got, medical. You have to go through the medical gatekeepers through the
Sure.
process. And here's the other thing too to consider, is because it is something that is a medical diagnosis, because it is medicalized, unless you are significantly struggling in one or more major life occupational areas, you may not get the diagnosis. So I got a diagnosis because I, at the time, was struggling in life. And now I'm fully accommodated because I know what I need and I got those needs
Sure.
met.
But
And so I'm not
that's
actually
the end
struggling.
result, though. You want that.
Yes, but I'm not struggling right now. So if you've naturally set your life up to where you're fully accommodated and you're not struggling, it might be hard for you to get a diagnosis.
But you also necessarily wouldn't need a diagnosis.
Yeah, well, that's true too.
I
But
mean,
sometimes, you're gonna
if
say
you're
for your peace
doing,
of mind,
if you're, I mean, people are only going to take action when they're in pain. So, I mean, if everything is going easy breezy and you're doing what you need to do for yourself and your team, then, then I think that's a good sign. But see, the unfortunate part, though, I think in that situation with neurodivergent people, is so much goes on behind the scenes, that
oh yeah.
they're hiding so much. They're trying, they're making allowances for things so that nobody sees X. And I
Hmm.
understand that. And so, and unfortunately, I don't know if there's an easy way around that situation. But I just think, as an employer, I think being self-aware for yourself in general first, if you notice that things are not smooth for yourself, and then I think, again, the smaller your team, the more important it is to be aware of all
Oh
that.
yeah. Yep.
Excuse me. Sorry. So, well, Krista, thank you so much. I'm really excited that I got to share in helping you spread the word about this topic, because it's an important topic for sure. So I am very, very grateful that you took the time to talk to all of us. I think people, if nothing else, there were some aha moments that people had. So I want to thank you so much for being here. All of you that are listening today, thank you for being here. Look again next week for another great topic. And to both of you, I want to say goodbye. Have a great week. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.